all healed up real good. I twisted around on my chair to pull on my shirt, wincing from the pain. Now don't you be fooling with me, Aunt Henry said. You walking good with no crutch. I knew she was right. Aside from the occasional shock of pain in my neck or in my knees, I was feeling almost human again. I had no further need for Aunt Henry's fussing and babying, which I had come to enjoy. And it was time for me to go back to Eudora. Frankly, I felt a bit reluctant to leave. There was something good about life as it happened in this modest little house. Certainly the opportunity to see Moody every day was something I had enjoyed, but as much as that, I had enjoyed getting to know Abraham. With everything going against him, the death of his grandson, the increasing fear in the colored community, the lifetime of bigotry he had endured, Abraham was a man at peace with himself. Just the night before, on a warm, rainy evening when the mosquitoes were at their droning worst, we sat on a bench underneath the overhang of the porch. We were working our way through a basket of hot corn muffins Moody had just brought out of the oven. I smiled up at her. She ignored me and turned back inside. Sometimes a man can sense something, Abraham said. Something small that can blossom up into trouble. You mean because we haven't heard from Roosevelt? I asked. I don't understand that at all. I almost got hanged for him. This got nothing to do with the president, he said, gazing off into the darkness. I'm talking about another kind of business. Right here in my house. I swallowed the rest of the muffin and wiped my mouth inelegantly on the back of my hand. I knew exactly what he was talking about. I had been hoping he wouldn't notice. Nothing has happened, Abraham, I said softly. Nothing is going to happen. He didn't look at me. I love that girl just about as much as I ever loved anybody, he said, including her mama, and including even my dear departed wife. As for you, well, I done took you into my house, hadn't I? That ought to show you. I hold you in high regard. You're a fine man, Ben, but this just can't be. It can't be. Moody and you, that is impossible. I understand that, Abraham. I don't think you ought to worry. Maybe you hadn't noticed, but Moody hasn't spoken a kind word to me since the day we met. He put his hand on my shoulder. And maybe you hadn't noticed, he said. But that's exactly how you can tell when a woman is in love with you. Chapter 73. From the day after my hanging, someone was always awake and on guard at Abraham Cross's house. During the day and the evening, Abraham and Moody took turns keeping watch from the front porch rocker. Since I was the cause of all this, I took the dead man shift from midnight till dawn. Some nights I heard Abraham stirring, and then he would come out to sit with me for an hour or two. One night, along about 4 a.m., I thought I heard his soft tread on the floorboards. I looked up. It was Moody standing there. Mind a little company? She said. I don't mind, I said. She sat down on the bench beside the rocker, a foot or two away from me, a safe distance. We sat in our usual silence for a while. Finally, I broke it. I've been busting to ask you a question, Moody. Wouldn't want you to bust, she said. What is it? Is that the only dress you own? She burst out laughing, one of the few times I'd made her laugh. It was the same white jumper she'd worn the day I met her, and every day since. Somehow it stayed spotless, although she never seemed to take it off. Well, if you really want to know, I got 3 of these dresses, she said. All three just alike. Of all the questions you could have asked me, that's the one you picked, she said. You are one peculiar man, Mr. Corbett. I sure wish you would call me Ben. Even your grandfather calls me Ben now. In case you hadn't noticed, I don't do everything he does, she said. I'll just keep on calling you Mr. Corbett. At first I thought it was moonlight casting that delicate rim of light around her face, lighting up her dark eyes. Then I realized that it was dawn breaking, the first streak of gray in the sky. I'll be moving back to Maybelle's tomorrow, I said. It's time. Moody didn't reply. It'll be better for Abraham once I'm out of here, I said. And for you. No answer. I said, the only reason those bastards come around is because I'm here. Nothing. She stared out at the street. Thanks to y'all, I'm much better now. I'm feeling fine. I've got some decisions to make. Her silence and stubbornness just went on, and I gave up trying to pierce it. I sat back and watched the gray light filling in all the blank, dark spaces. I think we sat another 10 whole minutes without a word. The sun came up and cast its first shadows of the day. At last, Moody said, You know I ain't never gonna sleep with you. I considered that for a moment. I know, I said. Is it because I'm white? No, she said. Because I'm black. Chapter 74. I am just as sorry as I can be, Mr. Corbett, but we simply have no rooms available at this time, Maybelle said to me. We are full up. The dilapidated rooming house seemed strangely deserted for a place that was completely occupied. But Abraham came by and paid you while I was incapacitated, I said. Your money is in that envelope on top of your baggage, she said, pointing at my trunk and valises in a dusty corner of the center hall. You can count it. It's all there. You accepted my money, I said, but now that I need the room, you're throwing me out? That makes no sense. Up till now, Maybelle had maintained her best polite Southern lady voice. Now the tone changed. Her voice dropped 3 notes. Look, I ain't gonna stand here and argue with the likes of you, she said. I don't know how I could make it any clearer. We got no rooms available for you. So if you don't mind, I will thank you to go on and leave the house now. I can't carry this trunk by myself, I said. Why don't you get one of your nigger friends to help you? She snapped. That's what I would do. I'll take the valises and send someone back for the trunk, I said. I stuffed the envelope in my pocket, picked up a bag in each hand, and walked out into the blazing noonday sun of Eudora. Now what? Sweet tea. That's what I needed, a frosty glass of tea, and time to think things through. I went to the Slide-In Cafe and sat at my usual table. I sat there for almost 20 minutes. I could not seem to get the attention of a waitress. Miss Fanny wouldn't even meet my eye. Oh, they saw me. The waitresses cast glances at me and whispered among themselves. The other customers, plump ladies in go-to-town dresses, raw-boned farmers, little girls clinging to their mama's skirts, they saw me too. When I dared to look back at them, they turned away. And I remembered what Abraham had said. Too many cowards, that's why the bullies could have their way. Finally, Miss Fanny approached with a glass of tea, dripping condensation down its sides. She spoke in a quiet voice. I'm sorry, Mr. Corbett. We don't all feel the same way about you. Personally, I got nothing against you. I like you, but I ain't the owner. So you'd best just drink this tea and be on your way. You're not welcome here. All right, Miss Fanny, I said. Thanks for telling me. I drank the tea in a few gulps. I put a quarter on the table. I hoisted my valises and walked out into the street. As I passed Miss Ida's notion shop, I saw Livia Winkler coming out. "Miss Winkler," I said, touching the brim of my hat. She suddenly looked flustered. Averting her eyes, she turned around and hurried back into the shop. I crossed the street to the watering trough in front of Sam Jenkins' Mercantile. I scooped up a handful of water and splashed my face. "That water is for horses, mules, and dogs," said a voice behind me. I turned. It was the same fat, red-headed man who with his two friends had jumped me at this very place when they were holding those boys' heads underwater. This time he held a branding iron in his hand. I was too exhausted to fight. I was hot. I was still a bit weak and wobbly from everything I had been through. But Red didn't know that. I straightened up to full height. "Use your brain," I said. "Turn around and walk away before I brand you." We stared each other down. Finally, he broke it off, shook his head in disgust, spat on the sidewalk near my shoes, and walked away. He looked back once. I was still there, watching him go. Then I turned and headed in the direction of the one person in Eudora I believed would help me. Chapter 75. "Well, damn, Ben. I could have used some warning, you know. I got about the biggest family in the littlest house in the whole town, and you want to move in here? Damn it all to hell, Ben." That was the warm greeting I got from Jacob Gill, my oldest friend in the world, my hope for a roof over my head that night. "Sorry, Jacob," I said, "but I didn't know anywhere else to go." He looked me over. I looked right back at him. Finally, he crossed some line in his mind. He sighed, picked up one of my valises, carried it through the tiny parlor, and into the tiny dining room. "I reckon this is the guest room now," he said, and finally offered up a half smile. "I'll get some blankets. We can make a pallet on the floor, unless you want to sleep out in a smokehouse. Got nothing hanging in there. It might be more private for you." "This will be fine," I said. Jacob's house was a sad sight on the inside. The few pieces of furniture were battered old cast-offs held together with baling wire and odd ends of rope. The cotton batting was coming out of the cushions on the settee. In the kitchen, a baby's cradle gave off an unpleasant aroma. A skinny cat nosed around the pantry, no doubt hoping to meet a mouse for lunch. Jacob said, "You want a drink?" "Just some water would be good for me." "The pump's on the back porch," he said. "I need me a finger or two myself." He didn't bother to pour the whiskey into a glass. He pulled the cork and took a big slug right out of the bottle. "Well, that's just fine, ain't it? Drinking straight from the bottle, and it ain't even lunchtime yet." This observation belonged to Charlotte, Jacob's wife, who came in from the back porch with an infant in one arm and a pile of laundry in the other. "Hello, Charlotte. Ben Corbett." "Yeah, I know who you are." Her voice was cool. "I heard you were back in town." "Ben's gonna be staying with us for a few days," said Jacob. "I told him he could sleep in the dining room." "That's grand," Charlotte said. "That's just wonderful. That ought to make us the most popular family in Eudora." Chapter 76. The second night I was at the Gill house, after a supper of leftover chicken parts and grits, Jacob suggested we go for a walk, a smoke, and a nip. First he poured whiskey from the big bottle into a half-pint bottle, which he stuck in his trouser pocket. He walked and drank. I walked and looked anxiously down every dark alley. "You sure are one hell of a nervous critter tonight," Jacob said. "You'd be nervous too if they beat you half to death and strung you up and left you for dead," I said. Excuse me if I tend to be a bit